Hello, and welcome to Ask Deb About Business. I'm Rom Gayoso, co-host. We are broadcasting via Futures Television, the home of the future on television. If you're listening to the show via podcast, watching us on TV, or listening to it on Radio Futures, you too can be part of the conversation. Just visit our YouTube channel, and that is IMCI Magazine, where we continue to chat about the topic of the day. You can also access this information on our website, and that is www.futurestelevision.com. So don't be shy. Today, our topic is, are we truly preparing our children for the future? Dr. George Land's NASA study back in 1968 showed that we are all born creative geniuses, but the education system dumbs us down. So what did he find in his research? Well, the children demonstrated creativity scores at genius level of 98% at age 5, 30% at age 10, 12% at age 15, and just 2% as adults, and that is on average age 31. Dr. Lane's observation was that by the time we finish school, we are probably much less creative than we were going in. The really bad news is that creativity is one of the most in-demand 21st century skills. We know that in order to keep up with the future of work, we all need to be able to come up with new solutions to new problems. And we can't do that if we don't have creative geniuses leading the charge. If Dr. Land's observations are true, what have we done since his NASA study in 1968 to transform our schools and nurture the natural creative genius in school children? And if his observations are true, we need to transform our schools immediately before more damage is done. Well, there's a lot to talk about on this topic, but worry no more. Now, you have someone to talk to. But first, let me say a few words about the show. Broadcasting live from Butterfield Studio in Chicagoland to the world, I would like to welcome you to Ask Deb About Business. The talk show is broadcast every other Thursday at 11 a.m. Central Time, where I join Deb Dietz to discuss a variety of business topics. So no matter what your venture is, you will certainly have questions. But worry no more. Now you have someone to talk to. So before we get started, let me say a few words about Deb Dietz. So Deb has a long and distinguished career as a coach, mentor, and through her awesome training programs at SMB Digital Education, she has enabled many entrepreneurs to follow their dreams. And that's exactly what I like about her. It's her ability to deliver practical advice to help you solve real problems. Have a business question? Well, let's ask Deb. Without further ado, let me welcome Deb Dietz to the show. Hi, Deb.
Hey, Rom. How are you? Great to see you today.
Wonderful in your beautiful Butterfield, studios in Vernon Hills, Illinois.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We look good, we sound good, and we're delighted to be here in Butterfield Studios. I also wanted to congratulate you, Rom, on adding Radio Futures to the Futures Television media family. Delighted about that news. So now our audience can watch us on TV and they can listen to us on the radio. So congratulations. And again, I also wanted to thank Jeff Horvath and the team at Butterfield Studio for this beautiful set and making us look and sound good. The Ask Deb About Business show really focuses on emerging trends, issues, and opportunities that face small to mid-sized businesses, business owners, business leadership, business professionals. and we invite subject matter experts on our show, experts who can help share their expertise, their wisdom with all of us. And my promise to all of you is that by the end of our time together today, that you will have at least one key takeaway that you can take forward and implement within your business. And today, our topic is the business of education. And I am delighted to welcome Katarina Hanssens Carlsson, who is joining us from Stockholm, Sweden. And she is going to share her wisdom and help us understand if we truly are preparing our children for the future.
How wonderful. Thank you so much for your kind words. And of course, we love the studios. Jeff does a fantastic job for us. So let's say a few words about our guest before we get started. So today, we're going to welcome Katarina Hanssens Carlsson. And she is the founder of Global Leadership Schools and CEO of Destiny International 11. She has worked successfully for the past 20 years with over 2,000 entrepreneurs internationally. Motivated by her deep interest in education and human nature, she acquired a degree in education at Homerton College, Cambridge, and then trained as a psychotherapist. She found her life purpose as an entrepreneurial business, vision consultant, and global trainer. She has been driven and focused on this ever since. As the founder of Global Leadership Schools, she's the leader of a team that transforms the schools globally. Author of your Entrepreneurial Blueprint Consultation and Training and your Leadership Blueprint Consultation and Training, her major contribution is to find her clients' entrepreneurial blueprint or leadership blueprint. Global Leadership Schools is currently introducing an international training program to train 195 schools worldwide in entrepreneurship and leadership. So Katarina's vision is one school in one town in every country of the world. So without further ado, let's welcome Katarina to the show. Hi there and welcome.
Hi there. Hi, Deb.
Hi, Katarina. So happy to have you with us today. We're delighted that you're here to share your expertise about the future of our children. And the future of our children is important to every single person who's watching and listening today. And I'd like to start out by just, kind of coming back to Ram's introduction when he was sharing the story of Dr. George Land and the work that he did for NASA, where NASA wanted to test the creativity, the creative thinking ability, the divergent thinking ability, and problem-solving ability of their rocket scientists, and then thinking about the future of the NASA space program, and would that future for the space program be facilitated by having the right types of candidates, potential employees to come in for a role like that. And so he took some of the testing that he did for those NASA scientists and employed them among preschoolers. And I think the results of that study were profound. And the fact that the takeaway there was that, 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds have this creative genius about them, and they scored in the 98th percentile, this 1,600 group of kids that he initially was analyzing. And over time, began to see a decline in their abilities to problem solve, to think creatively. And so you have to kind of ask yourself the question, why did that happen? How did that happen? And these are children that are just embarking in their elementary education world. And he measured them at 4 or 5 years old. He measured them again at 10 and 15 and saw the dramatic decline. And so that sort of begs the question, are we dumbing down our children, where we're not really, the school system is not preparing them for this robust future that certainly is what we all desire for them, for our children. And so I think let's start there, Katarina, is you and I have had this conversation about kids and about the school system, and you made the comment to me at one point about our schools are information factories, that we're not developing these creative thinking and problem-solving skills. So what have you found in your experience, and tell us a little bit about that and about the work you do to try to turn that tide.
Okay, thank you, Deb. Yes, it's a bit harsh, but I think that we do have information factories. I heard today that for example, in Chicago, that teachers are not even allowed to create their own lesson plans, that they're now told what to do. So it seems to me that teachers are being turned into kind of robots, and no wonder there are lack of teachers. And they're not creating the curriculum like they do in Finland. And Finland has a very, very high score in not only academics, but children that are happy in school. They have no homework. They have a lot of playtime, and these are schools that are working. Not so much in Sweden, but in Finland. And what we're doing, what we're supposed to be doing, is educating. And education comes from educating comes from the Latin word educare, which is to bring out. It's not to force in information, it's to bring out. And it's actually, I would say, it's to bring out the brilliance in every child, because every child has a natural born brilliance. And we need to nurture that all the way through schools.
So you use the term educare, which I love. I think everybody's very familiar with healthcare, senior care as an example, but that there's an opportunity here for our school system to really kind of wear the hat of educare. How could they go about employing some of those practices so that they can truly create an environment that is nurturing and fostering the development of these skills in very young children?
Thank you, Deb. First of all, what I would do with a school environment is I would start by training the parents to observe their children and to encourage them in anything that fascinates them, interests them. And I've noticed that children at a very, very young age, 1 or 2, are fascinated, for example, by insects, they're fascinated by nature. And we need to nurture that fascination from a very early age. And we need to learn not to say no so much, but to say, yes, this is exciting. So trainings for parents to actually encourage their children, leadership trainings for principals to be exceptional leaders so that whole school is dynamic, and entrepreneurial trainings for teachers, so that if the teacher is an entrepreneur and thinks like an entrepreneur in a divergent thinking way, as opposed to convergent thinking, then he or she will be able to bring out the entrepreneurial brilliance, or at least encourage them, the entrepreneurial coaches, to children who are naturally creative, and many of them are natural entrepreneurs.
So what I'm hearing you, so there's an opportunity here for parents certainly to look for enrichment activities, if you will, for ways to help develop their own children. I think what we've seen over the course of the last couple of years, and with what's happened with children, we're doing schoolwork online and from home, is that parents have become more aware of the curriculum that is being taught to their children. Certainly there's that more awareness about that, and also it presents an opportunity now because parents, I think, have a heightened awareness about some of the current constraints within the classroom, and maybe looking for ways to provide those enrichment activities. And even what we're seeing also is parents becoming more and more involved, within the school system, really participating more greatly in school board meetings, as an example. Can't really turn on the news without seeing, parents at the microphone really advocating for, the right kind of curriculum and really being advocates for their children. So I think, if, parents certainly can, play the role of being that advocate, looking for ways to provide enrichment within the home, as well as then advocating for their children at the school board level, participating, becoming more active. So is that kind of a good, best practice is for student or parents to kind of wear both of those hats?
Absolutely, because if their children are if the children's brilliance is nurtured, the children are going to be in joy. They're going to be happy children. Happy children are easy to bring up. Unhappy children are difficult to bring up. And we don't want the child to get to a point where he feels such desperation that he starts to take drugs or gets into gangs or gives up on himself, gives up on schools, or, worst case scenario, goes in and shoots his fellow students and teachers. I mean, that we have to take notice of that. And it's wonderful news to hear that parents are getting more and more engaged.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because certainly, we're seeing, certainly in the workplace, we're seeing one of the trends that we're seeing this year, certainly in the business, within the workforce, is this increase of, mental health issues in the workplace. Now what's happened is, a lot of that is filtered down into the home and onto our young people. And a recent statistic that I saw was really speaking about depression levels, in 8 and 9-year-olds. And you have to kind of ask yourself, what is happening there? And I think a lot of it comes down to self-confidence, self-esteem, the ability for these children to express themselves in a way that maybe they haven't been encouraged to do, maybe within the classroom. So I think there's a lot of work ahead that educators, as well as parents and the village that surrounds those children, because it certainly takes a village to raise children, can be mindful of the enrichment opportunities that they can provide, so that these children can build confidence and build their self-esteem. And another thing is, when you look at the school system, we always talk about, certainly in the business world, that you get what you measure. Right? So if we're measuring students' ability to score on a test, as an example, right? We're testing them for competence in a certain area, and if that's the measure, that's a measure, right? So we're testing them for their ability maybe to check the right box or have the right answer. But that's not really doing much to foster their creative brilliance. And I love that you use that term, creative brilliance. Tell us a little bit more about what that means, and what steps the school system as well as parents can take to encourage that development of that creative brilliance, and maybe not worry so much about having the right answer on a test.
Thank you, Deb. Yes, what at the moment we are fostering academics and intellectuals to regurgitate information. And so what can we do to bring out the brilliance? I mean, 7-year-olds that I have taught are unlimited, and we should encourage that lack of limitation. And I think that we need to train 7-year-olds, even at that very early age, to play entrepreneurial games. And as we go through the school, encourage entrepreneurship. It's actually required in Swedish schools now. It's required to encourage it. It's not mandatory, but it's required. And imagine if you, Deb, you go to school and you're 7 years old and you love, for example, skateboarding. And you learn to create a team. You learn to find out if you're a visionary, if you're an organizer, or if you're a marketer. And you get into teams and you play a game, but it's kind of a serious game, because this is a game which can provide you with an entrepreneurial business by the time you leave school, and you learn your mistakes all the way through. And if the principal is dynamic and encourages your brilliance, and if the teachers are dynamic and encourage your entrepreneurial skills, then you gain in not only in self-confidence, but entrepreneurial knowledge, so that you can make your mistakes all the way through school, leave school with a business that you can then monetize, and you have an income stream for the rest of your life, and you have confidence because you know how to work in a team, you know who you are, you know if you're a visionary, an organizer, and marketer, and you're pretty self-confident because you've done well in school, even if you've made mistakes. You know.
Exactly. You've learned a lot. You've certainly learned a lot and leveraged kind of that right side of your brain and the left side of your brain, right? And by mirroring both sides of your brain, the ability for you to attack these problems or identify potential solutions to a problem, you know, gets that thought process going and allows children to try, right, trial and error. With that comes the learning and the knowledge that builds self-confidence. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, now let's remain on that confidence a little longer. So we get lots of comments on Facebook, and Katarina, I wanted to pose you the question. So certainly we talk about the need of building confidence in children at a very early age. So this week, as you well know, the Prime Minister of Finland, they released this video of her dancing, okay, which is absolutely normal. So when the male Prime Minister of Italy gets drunk and gets in a brawl in a bar, we laugh at it. But when the female Prime Minister of Finland, so a Scandinavian country, which we thought, well, more open-minded at least, is dancing, we say, oh, is she competent to be the Prime Minister? So do we have to not only help, boys, but also girls become more confident, but do we have to go back and rethink about the issue of gender and ensuring that both boys and girls are confident and are treated equally?
Absolutely. I mean, my experience was I went to a co-ed school in London. It was a very good school. So it was a good beginning to my life. And then we were just like girls only. I mean, life is about men and women. So we should have co-ed schools and we should learn to get on together. And I think it's a perfectly natural thing to do. And businesses should have men and women, of course. As they do in Scandinavia. I think there was a law passed about 10 years ago that you had to have at least, I think, 30% of the board of directors had to be women. And they did that. It actually got into the press by mistake, but it became a law.
I thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Another thing too, that was recently in the news, a little bit of a different piece of information was, I just saw this literally 2 days ago about the reading literacy scores within the United States. So something is, fundamental as reading skills is becoming more and more challenging for our children. And we're starting to see some of the states here in the US really start to go back to the basics. It's almost like they're going back to the use of phonics as an example, as the tool in capital letters, the tool to teach children how to read. And teaching children how to read is challenging. It's not an easy thing to do, but what has transpired, I think, and what we've seen over time is that we're not teaching children what they need, the fundamentals, and we talk in terms of core curriculum. You made the comment earlier about the schools are developing the lesson plans, and then the teachers are there to implement an existing lesson plan, as opposed to having really the ability to customize and develop curriculum that fits the needs of their specific children in their class. And so now what we've done, we use the term, are we dumbing down our children? Just something as recent as 2 days ago with the challenge in reading literacy, is very challenging. And they liken that result to depression in 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds who are depressed because they don't have the self-confidence and they're struggling with their reading skills. So I think we talk about core curriculum. I think there's a lot to do, and you mentioned this early on in our conversation about intervening in these children's education in the classroom and at home very early in their lives, very as early as preschool, as an example, because the last thing we want is for children to get to be third, fourth, fifth grade and they're struggling with reading, really starts to turn the tide not in their favor. And of course we're here today to talk about the future of our children and preparing our children for the future. So I think that this is an opportunity, and one of the things I love about our show is that to provide these trends to our audience, to say hey, this is what the data is telling us. These are trends that we're facing, certainly in business, and here the business of education, which is today's topic. But here's an opportunity for us to intervene. Number one, have the awareness. I want our audience to have that awareness, and because everybody can be an advocate for children everywhere, to make sure that they are truly embarking on the right path from a very young age.
Absolutely. It saddens me to know that that illiteracy is increasing. I mean, the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, should be, normal for any 5 or 6-year-old. It's very, very difficult to go through life without being able to read or write. So these children should have special classes. Absolutely. They shouldn't go further than like 2nd grade without being able to read or write.
Mm-hmm.
Because of course it's going to affect their confidence. How can they go through school life? How can they go through life life? We need to take, this is a very serious problem.
But it's not enough, right? So the 3 R's are, the very, very basic, but where should we focus to actually develop and foster that brilliance? Where should we go?
Okay. I think to start with entrepreneurial trainings or entrepreneurial games at a very, very young age, because children love to tell you about their brilliance. Children love to tell you about their ideas. And the trouble is, what we're doing in schools today is we're shutting them up instead of saying, allow them, even in preschool, to talk about, what I love to do when I'm at home, what I think I'll do when I'm an adult, and let them share that and have the conversation be between children. What is your brilliance? Ask the teachers, what is your brilliance? Ask the principal, what is your brilliance? So it's a conversation that goes on in the classroom, at home, in the playground. And instead of, what kind of iPhone have you got? It's more, what's your joy? What's your brilliance? And focus on that, rather than you're not so good at mathematics or you're not so good at science. So focus on their strengths. And also, it's been proved, Karolinska Institute here in Stockholm have proved that children up to 6 years old are linguistic geniuses. So when you learn a second language, the information from your brain moves to another part of your brain. So children become brighter. They use more of their brains. They should be learning between 2 and 3 languages. And children love languages, and they pick them up easily, and they learn grammar easily. They don't even know it's grammar, but they speak correctly. And it's a huge advantage for them.
So Deb, I wanted to ask you a question as an educator, and you did a lot of research in terms of the literacy skills. I'm not just talking about the R's and the brilliance, but one of the points that you made in a different show was about the lack of financial literacy.
Mm-hmm.
So could you please go over and explain why is it important for us to help children acquire financial literacy early on in life?
Ram, I love that question. Thank you. Such a great question. And, as my business partner, Bill Hasse, and I are focused on providing financial literacy education to young people because, the conversation about money is not happening at home. There's not a lot of conversation about just basic financial information and education. And so, we believe that there's an opportunity here to teach kids about money. And starting, and Bill and I are taking the approach of starting at the high school and college level because these are life skills. So we talk about the future of kids. I know a lot of the conversation we're having today is focusing on younger children, but these are themes that are carried on from a young age through adolescence, certainly through high school and college. And so there's an opportunity here to let kids know about how to manage money, because these are life skills. This is information that will set them up well for the future. Everything we talk about, and I mean, Ron, we're on Futures Television, and we're talking about the future. We're talking about the future of kids, and financial literacy is a key component of that. We also talked about entrepreneurial skills, and I know Katarina is an advocate for that as well. Teaching, and by doing so, by teaching these entrepreneurial skills, you're teaching kind of how to leverage your right and left side of your brain. You're thinking you have to be creative when you're embarking on owning a business. You have to have the analytical skills as well. So I think that there's a lot we could do to provide our children with, and these are life skills. So we sort of assume that the children, when they're in the school system, are learning the core curriculum, the reading, the writing, the arithmetic. Well, maybe not as much as they should be, I'll say that. So there's work to do certainly on the core curriculum side, the reading, the writing, the arithmetic, and then, and adding on to that, building their skills in the areas of, money and, and what does it look like to maybe run a business, or what about, how to become more self-aware, how to be, empathetic to my friends, so there's so many life skills that we really are embracing, educating children on. And so I think we need to do all of that. We need to focus on doing better on the core curriculum, the 3 R's, if you will, but also on helping them build life skills that will set them up well for their future success, which is our ultimate goal.
Now, you both are talking about a very different kind of school. One, it's more comprehensive. So, Katarina and Deb, I have to ask you this question specifically to you, Katarina. Well, we can't do that without retraining teachers and principals and getting together with the boards of education. So, in your experience, Katarina, and when you teach your leadership training classes, what's the role, or what should be the new role of the principal, the school administrators, the teachers? Could you give us some insight into that?
Okay, thank you. For the principal, I think number one, he or she needs to love children and care about their future. And if they're not, I don't know what they're doing as principals. So they need to be dynamic. They need to be the core person who, the hub of the school, the dynamic hub of the school. They need to be able to run a team of dynamic teachers who also love the children and love to teach. I mean, you may not be able to love every single child. People are human beings. But at least you can respect them and accept them. And the teacher's role needs to be less convergent in mindset and more divergent. In other words, encourage entrepreneurship by becoming and being trained as entrepreneurial coaches, so that they can encourage the children to have ideas and to implement their ideas, and to be able to distinguish between the children who are visionaries, organizers and marketers, because it's once they're trained, it's fairly easy to tell, and to have children work in teams, so that the teacher changes role, from teaching a teaching role to an entrepreneurial role, and is one fellow entrepreneur, and he or she gets to know the children in a completely different way. And I think that's paramount for a school, that they don't just see the teacher as an information robot. You asked about the administration as well. Everybody concerned in the school, including the parents, need to be advocates of the children's brilliance, and we're a long way from doing that right now. But children can be trained, teachers can be trained if they're open to it, and principals can be trained.
Now, Deb, I wanted to ask you about specifically the school boards, right? So one aspect is the teachers and the principals, but then there are the administrators, are the people who actually run. So to what extent do you think they subscribe to this idea that Katarina is advocating here? I mean, fostering brilliance in all aspects of life. So not just the 3 R's, but brilliance, excelling. She said so many words in there: loving the children. So we don't bring the L world into boards, perhaps as often as we should, and in accepting and embracing people. But this idea of brilliance, in your dealings with the school boards, are people resistant? Are they just not aware, or are they too busy doing the administrative work? So how do you go about fostering the brilliance discussion with the boards of education?
Well, I think you have to, the place that I start always is with the data. What is the data telling you about, performance, and what is, and I used an example earlier about, reading literacy rates, here in the U.S. And what we're finding is that now they're going back to basics, back to the teaching of phonics as a way to teach children how to read. And I think that that's always a good place to start. Is you have to look at and we're a show. We focus on trends. We focus on data points to help us understand a situation. I think the data points are people are very aware of what is happening and recognizing that improvements need to be made. And so I think a good place to start is to share those statistics, to have a conversation around those statistics, and then solve the problem. Right, come forward with recommendations and suggestions, and try and test some of those new potential teaching models as an example. And I love the comment that Katarina made about tapping into each child's individual brilliance, because I think that is a component that's missing. Is that I think, and Katarina, correct me if I'm wrong, or you have a different perspective, that children are not homogeneous. They're not all the same. They're all individuals. They all have their strengths and their weaknesses. They all have their own, brilliance aptitude, if you will. And it's really the responsibility of the teachers to be able to take the time to be able to understand each individual's children's brilliance or brilliance opportunity and cultivate that. And I think that if we start looking at children as individuals, and maybe there's different curriculum for different children who are exhibiting different proficiencies or different competencies, and then putting a plan together in place. I'll use a personal example of when my son was in 8th grade. He was in 3rd grade. He was 8 years old. He was in 3rd grade, and his teacher called us at home, my husband and I, and said, we see Zach's very bright. We would like to recommend that he take some enrichment programs. There's a great program at Northwestern University, and so when he was 8, we took him for 3 years to Northwestern every Saturday morning for enrichment programs, and they were very STEM, related. He subsequently became a mechanical engineer, but he had a teacher who recognized that about him. And I'm sure there were others in the classroom that were able to benefit from that as well. But the point that I want to make is you have to understand, you have a classroom, and I know it's challenging because you may have 25, 30 children in a class, but I think it's important to understand and know your children in your classroom and make recommendations so that you can sort of have an understanding of their current brilliance, and then how you can enrich that.
Absolutely, Deb. Couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely.
No, so Katarina, you're talking about a very different kind of teacher. So you are bringing the different roles, so the leadership, so the teacher as a leader. So as a parent, so what can we do? How can we engage our respective school districts or whichever administration we have so that we communicate with them? You know what? We want the leadership skills on the teachers. We want these teachers to be leaders, not just the 3 R's. So how do we engage with the traditional school system that doesn't value that? So what kind of role do we have as parents, or how could we foster? We need Katarina. We need someone to come here and retrain our people. But the traditional school boards don't want any change. So how do you start the conversation?
That's a great question. Would you like to hear some good news?
Yes.
Ram and Deb?
Yes.
Well, there's a school in Kabul, in Mexico, and there's a group of brilliant people who are starting an educational transformation, basically. They've been given carte blanche to this school in Kabul. The owner of the school approved, and they want to completely transform the concept of school that we have today. And it's headed by a man called Anurag Gupta. Joshua Perdue is more in the financial group, and will eventually be able to finance trainings. But I've been invited over there, and I will be going probably in January or March in 23, and introducing my trainings. It hasn't been completely approved yet, but I want to go, and they're very interested in my programs, and they're also interested in certification. So it's Global Leadership School certification, starting with parent trainings, teacher trainings, principal consultations, and entrepreneurial trainings. So what I would like to do, what we want to do, is make a splash, bring that into the media. Their branding is being handled by Oprah Winfrey's team. And I think once we make a difference there, that the world is going to sit up and realize that, okay, maybe we need to make some changes.
Wow, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, and congratulations and best wishes on that initiative, because again, that it can truly be impactful, and I think there to be a lot of best practices that probably come out of that as well. Let's just shift a little bit and talk. I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about the stress issues that our young people are experiencing in today's world. And what in Katarina, in the work that you're doing, what are you finding because we're living in a stressful world. I mean, business owners are stressed, adults are stressed, children are stressed. What can we do to help our kids prepare for the future and help them minimize some of the stress and emotional turmoil that they're undergoing right now?
Great question. You talked about financial autonomy, and I think what we need to teach children is emotional autonomy, to be able to decipher what kind of emotions they're actually feeling and to be able to articulate them, to be able to communicate them. I think that's absolutely essential, and we can educate children at a very early age to define their feelings and to be able to express them and not to make themselves wrong for that or anybody else wrong for that. So it's very, very important that we help children to do that and to also accept themselves and love themselves and get out of the, we're stressed because we compare. Basically we're stressed because we're always trying to reach an impossible goal. Well, that's nonsense. Excuse me, but it's crazy. What we need to do is to focus more on what gives us joy, focus on our brilliance, focus on our feelings. And I'm not saying we should all sit and meditate in school all day long and say, or whatever. And I'm not making a mockery of that. I think that it has its place. And perhaps it would be good for children to learn meditation as well. But I think we live in a crazy world because we have a crazy way of thinking. And we've lost touch with our inner core. And the children who go through the schools that we train and the schools that we create will have a very clear concept of who they are and how important they are in the world, not in an ego sense, but in a way that they are important because they contribute. Like Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Now, see, I love that because they're learning about themselves, right? They're learning what they like, what they don't like. Maybe they're having some self-awareness about what they're good at, or self-awareness about maybe where they're not. And so I think that by exposing them to, this notion of entrepreneurship, which is kind of this 360-degree view of the world, right? They're able to tap into some of their own creative brilliance, and they will find opportunities for themselves to shine, right? To rise up and with that, and contribute. And so contribute versus compare. So I love that comment that you made about, a lot of stress comes from the comparison, but that, if we're focusing on their strengths and not their weaknesses, and we provide them with opportunities to contribute, to try, to learn, to explore, right? That will go a long way in helping them build their self-esteem. They'll be able to become more self-aware, and then maybe we'll find that over time they're comparing themselves less and less to their peer group. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. They'll be comparing themselves to themselves and saying, I can raise the bar in this subject, or I can raise the bar in my entrepreneurship. But what they will be doing is learning cooperation rather than competition, and working with teams and realizing it's a win-win situation when you're cooperating with other children. If they cooperate in their schools, they will continue to cooperate as adults. They won't compete, they won't backstab, they won't create toxic environments like there are many times in the corporate world. And every child will have their brilliance profile, so that any teacher in the school or even a parent of that child can look at their child's brilliance profile and find all of their strengths and encourage those strengths. And it will be up to the child to say, well, I'm not so good at mathematics and I want to be better. I want to be better. Or the child would say, I don't care. I'm not interested. I'm interested in money, but I'm not interested in mathematics. And then we could have the conversation in, well, if you're an entrepreneur, maybe it's a good idea that you are focused on money and how to make it and how to grow it and how to keep it also.
I love that. You talk about the brilliance profile, and I think, that might be an interesting takeaway for those who are watching and listening today is, if there is a way that we could advocate for our children to have a brilliance profile so that, we can understand better, the school system, the superintendents, the administrators, even parents can understand how to tap into and how to nurture that brilliance. I love that. And then just one final comment about, the comparison, the contribution versus comparison discussion is by providing opportunities for these kids to build their confidence, to understand what they're good at. They will recognize that they're not good at everything, and neither is anybody else, right? Everybody has their strengths. Yeah. And with that comes sort of an awareness about, their peers, and maybe there's a level of empathy that comes forward, and a general understanding that everybody's special, everybody has their own competence and their own brilliance, their own issues, their own weaknesses. But you as grown-ups, as people in business, we look at emerging trends. A lot of our show topics are about emerging trends, and and I look back at last year, and the number one emerging trend for business owners, SMB, small to mid-market business owners, was all about funding. We were in the middle of a pandemic. Getting emergency funding was critically important. Here we are, at the beginning of this year, and now the number one trend in business, or emerging trend, the issues or challenges in the workplace are emotional intelligence and empathy. So, you take that kind of like, that's kind of a wow factor about, and the more that we understand about, about how to be mindful that we all are special, we all have our different, competencies, if you will, but it also helps us understand that, not everybody is the same, and that we need to be respectful of that. And I think that if we just have that mindset, if we can help children understand those differences and have an appreciation for the differences, then maybe we'll stop seeing some of this comparison and then the issues that come from that when you may see your self-esteem, falter.
Absolutely. And can you imagine with a brilliance profile that, we're human beings, and as you say, we're all unique. But imagine a teacher who really doesn't get on with a child, or a child who doesn't get on with a teacher, and it happens in nearly every classroom. Imagine if that teacher can access that child's brilliance profile, and find what are their goals, what are their vision. Then immediately they have a talking point, because it's all about the child.
Right.
And the teacher could say, well, maybe you don't like me very much, and maybe we got off to a bad start, but I realized that you love ice hockey, and I would love to help you realize your dreams in ice hockey. In fact, I have a friend, and he may be able to coach you in ice hockey. Would that be something you'd be willing to accept? That could be a conversation rather than, well, you disrupt my class. And the child says, well, I don't like you anyway. So
exactly.
It's a much more constructive.
This is just absolutely wonderful. This is not exactly where I expected us to go, but this is the kind of conversation we should be having. So I wanted just to take a moment and kind of summarize what I think you guys said. So I think our real topic is, are we truly educating our children, or are we dumbing them down, right? So having them sit in this, Katarina described them as information factories, right? So we're focusing on the R's, and maybe not so well as we should, but we're not focusing on brilliance, right? So we really need to kind of put our emphasis on the strengths, not on the weaknesses, right? We need to bring all the types of skills, entrepreneurial skills, right? We need to retain the teachers. We need to retrain the boards of education. We need to re-engage with people. And one thing that I kind of love that you guys, well, first you introduced the word love back into the school, but this brilliance profile, right? The ability of having that and being known, being shared, so that we all can work together. And perhaps, as you explained, maybe someone doesn't care much about math, but they care about money, or they care about ice hockey, and then you re-engage that child
Right.
with ice hockey. Right? So it's not with arithmetic or linguistic, but it was ice hockey. Whatever it was, we were able to identify that brilliance factor and help that child shine, right? So we really need to hear back from you what goes on in Cabo. We want to hear more about that
Absolutely.
experience, right? And what comes out of it. Deb, some last closing thoughts.
No, I appreciate that, and I think you're going to have some great lessons to share with us, Katarina. Would love to have you come back and for our Take Two show and explore some of these topics, maybe in greater detail, go a little bit deeper. But I'm so delighted that you're with us today, sharing your wisdom with our audience, and please, let us know how that is moving forward and how we can all learn from it, and then use that as a best practice to take forward.
Thank you, Deb. It's been a pleasure to be here. You guys are great. You really care about education. That's obvious, and you really care about children. So
And we
thank
care
you.
about transformational leaders like
Yes.
you are, and that's what we
Absolutely.
need. It's a
Absolutely.
transformational leader to come in into this old field of mode education system and turn it around. And I think you're the person to do that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Katarina.
Thank you, Katarina. So let's say a few words about the upcoming shows. So again, Thursday, September the 8th, our guest will be JD Gershbein on Pioneering the Next Frontier of LinkedIn. On September the 22nd, our guest will be Caroline Leonard on how to finance your dreams. That's very important. Someone's going to have to pay for it. It doesn't happen by chance. On October the 6th, our guest will be George Sullivan on climate change, sustainability, and why you and your business should care, and steps you can take. Folks, I can't say this and repeat it enough, but Ask Deb About Business is recorded at Butterfield Studio in Vernon Hills, Illinois, located at 1000 Butterfield Road, Suite 1007. Again, Vernon Hills, just 25 minutes north of Chicago's O'Hare Airport. With its 7,500 square feet customizable staging and broadcasting space, the studio, with its full service production and broadcasting team, is sure to service your next conference, game show, product launch, brand activation, you name it. As Deb About Business, the host and Features Television, thank Butterfield Studio for making this show awesome. We love you guys. Again, thank you so much for being with us today. I hope you come back. And if you have more questions for Katarina, please be sure to submit them again via our YouTube channel. Again, IMCI Magazine via YouTube. Thanks again. And I'm going to leave you with our institutional message. See you next time.